Dennis Slemmer. Dennis is our Bureau Chief of Transportation Planning at KDOT, and those of us in the legislature know Dennis very well. If it has anything to do with transportation, Dennis has the inside scoop. So Dennis is going to explain. We recently had released our service development plan, and Dennis is going to update us on what was in the plan. Thank you.
What a wonderful facility here. I can't remember it looking this grand when I took my grad physical here a few years ago, but I probably had other things on my mind. Well, just to give you a little history, for several years now, KDOT has been requested by, we've got requests from legislators and the public to study the feasibility of expanded passenger rail service in Kansas and on this particular corridor, Kansas City, Oklahoma City, Fort Worth corridor. We've been involved in the development of two studies. The first of those was the Amtrak feasibility study that was released in 2010, and then most recently the service development plan that was released back in this past November. The work was done jointly with the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. We jointly matched funds along with the federal HISPR grant, the High-Speed Intercity Passenger Rail grant. And we held regular conference calls and involved staff from the Missouri DOT as well as Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas DOTs. And the consultant on the study was Parsons Bricker-Hall. We also had good cooperation with BNSF officials, Amtrak, and FRA, all contributing to the development of the document. Well, as far as the contents of the document, it's all designed to investigate the rationale for investing in the project. An important part of that is what's called purpose and need in the planning permits. Other sections of the report describe the operation of the service, infrastructure improvements, rolling stock, and ongoing costs for operation. And then finally, projections of ridership, revenue, and then an analysis of the benefits and costs of the system, of the service. We looked at two options here, and Chris Larson described them very well, and so I won't spend a whole lot of time on those. The two options, one being the connection from Oklahoma City up to Newton, where we connect with the Southwest Chief, and then daytime service between Kansas City and Fort Worth via Wichita and Oklahoma City. And then one thing to point out is that this is not what some would consider high-speed rail. It's conventional rail equipment operating at a top speed of 79 miles per hour. Here's a map without Deborah's graphics on it. Her graphics were much better, but you've seen where the corridor is. Findings, and I've heard some of the findings mentioned already, but the ridership for the Heartland Flyer extension, the extension from Oklahoma City north, is a little over 200,000 passengers per year, including those passengers that are on the existing service. And then for the daytime service between Kansas City and Fort Worth, it's a little over 270,000 passengers per year. The total cost for the extension is $136.5 million. That's for everything, all considerations. And then for the daytime service, it's $436.2 million for the Kansas City, Oklahoma City, Fort Worth. And just to add in, for the combined service, if you did both of them, that'd be about $475 million. We also looked at the requirement for operating subsidy that would have to be provided, and that would be $4.4 million per year for the Heartland Flyer extension. That would be for all states, Kansas and Oklahoma, with some sort of a share determined. And then for the daytime service, it would be about $10 million for the operating expenses. Finally, the service development plan provides a benefit cost analysis meeting FRA criteria that can then be used when the time comes to apply for federal assistance for the work. We used a range of contingencies. We looked at both a 30% contingency and a 15% contingency, and the benefit cost for the extension was calculated to be 0.88% or 30% contingency and 0.93 if 15% is used. And then for the daytime service, it would be 0.61 for the 30% contingency and 0.64 if the 15% is used. The combined service would be 0.83 and 0.87. On January 25th, we presented information to the Transportation Committee members and to a meeting of the Kansas Rail Caucus. At that time, we advised the legislators that KDOT did not support taking additional steps, including the NEPA analysis or preliminary engineering, until funding for the entire project and service was identified by the Kansas legislature. During those meetings, we got several questions, and some of those questions, the first one involves funding, sources and timing. There are sources of funding available. Aside from the state funding, there's also federal funding that would include Tiger grants and HISPER grants when they are available. And of course, those are subject to availability and often require matching funds. Several legislators also asked about doing additional economic analysis to look at jobs created and the economic impact of economic development that would occur during following the implementation of the service. KDOT has been contacting Kansas station stop cities to gather information about estimated economic development that would occur. We're in the process of running those numbers, and we will make those available to the legislators once that information is available. We were also asked about the likely cost for Kansas. The first time we presented it, we just looked at total cost, but I provided a table for most of you earlier. If you don't have one, I have several more copies that split it out based on state-only funding, and then what if we get federal funding, and what would Kansas share be, what would Oklahoma share be. This involves a lot of assumptions, but they're the best assumptions we would have based on track miles improvement, that sort of thing. All right. Well, shortly after the January 25th presentations, and with encouragement, I might say, from some legislators at the time, to consider looking at a joint application with Oklahoma and Texas for Tiger grant funds. We looked at Tiger grant funds for a multi-state application, but the problem we ran into was that Oklahoma and Texas were unable to commit matching funds. So we decided to try and move forward with a Kansas-only project. So that Tiger application that we moved forward with was to do circuitry improvement on the section from Newton to the Oklahoma state line. We had some preliminary discussions with BNSF, and we understood at the time, although that was incorrect, that circuitry improvement would allow them to run their freight trains faster. However, after submitting the pre-app, we received clarification that that was not the case, and that the proposed work would not increase the speed of the freight trains. And in fact, the increased circuitry would come at a cost to do maintenance on that circuitry. And since it wasn't benefiting BNSF, that KDOT would be expected to pick that about $500,000 a year cost. So given the lack of benefit for the rail freight traffic and the fact that the 20-year life of the circuitry would be a large percentage of that would be used up before we actually have any passenger rail traffic on the corridor and the additional cost to KDOT, it was decided not to submit a final application for that work. Going forward, I see several issues and challenges going forward. First of all, there needs to be agreement between Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas officials, legislators, regarding the type of service to be provided. Would it be the extension? Would it be the daytime service? Would it be a combination? At a minimum, Kansas and Oklahoma would have to come to agreement just for the Heartland Flyer extension if that was what was agreed to. Secondly, how would the capital improvements and the service subsidy be funded, and what share of costs would each state or party bear? Keep in mind that the T-Works, the Kansas Transportation Program, is already fully committed, and that we've heard from Oklahoma and Texas officials that they have competing passenger rail needs within their states. Regarding federal funding, the future amounts and eligibilities of federal funding is uncertain at this time. We don't know exactly what's going to come out. We think that there will be continued federal funding. We just don't know exactly what it will be at this time. And then finally, we'll have to reach agreement with BNSF as to the extent of the improvements that would be needed and any cost sharing that should take place. The costs that we came up with were based on our consultant's best information, but we don't have a final agreement with BNSF that would be the actual cost. So in summary, the effort is very complex and there's lots of moving parts and numerous stakeholders. A lot of work has been done, but there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. There's my contact information if you need to contact me for any reason. Thank you.